Whoa. What are you doing, Les? Roll it. Grandma? Michael, we're going to throw something out after, right? Yes, it's behind you, Rabbi. Okay, I got you.
Oh, really? Have you been walking all over?
There's the speaker right there. Friends, we gather together this afternoon to celebrate the life. That doesn't seem to be working. Friends, we gather together this afternoon to celebrate the life and to honor the memory of Morrie Dannenhirsh, even though we're observing social distancing and in some way we feel separated from one another, not only in terms of space, but also in terms of seeing the whole face of one another. We still feel connected here this afternoon, and we're glad that several of you are tuning in on Zoom as we form a community of those of us who loved Morrie. Adonai ma'adam v'teda ehu ben enosh v'achashvehu. Oh Lord, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days are like a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up, in the evening it fades and it withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, return, you mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked or taken the path of sinners or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, whose foliage never fades, and whose fruit always flourishes. O Lord, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain. Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless but honor those who revere the Lord, who give their word and come what may, do not retract, who do not exploit others, who never take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. Let us take comfort together now in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kohelet, the author of the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us that for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Our dear Morrie Dannenhirsh died this past Saturday afternoon at the age of 80. He had been ailing for some time, and finally he could fight no longer. We are so sad that he is now gone from our sight, but he will never be gone from our hearts. Morrie was born in Cleveland, graduated from Cleveland Heights High School, and matriculated at the University of Chicago, from which he graduated with a degree in history. Thereupon, he returned to Cleveland and worked for a period of time for the Jewish Family Service. Along the way, he entered law school at Case Western Reserve University, from which he received his law degree. Then he taught at a high school, we think, for a year or so before taking a position for the Labor Department of the government, working on protecting the rights of the employees of the companies that had government contracts. Though he didn't love his job, he remained in this position for more than 30 years, leaving only when he retired 12 or 15 years ago. These then are some of the bare facts of Morrie Dannenhirsh's life. But what kind of person was he? What were the attributes that helped to define him? What were his strengths? What were his vulnerabilities? As for his strengths, all who knew Morrie know that he was a warm and caring person. Never loud or aggressive or even overt about it, Morrie let you know in his quiet way that he cared. And he often did so with a sly smile or a shy smile, or even with a direct and unforced look in the eye. His dear friend Maida related to me yesterday when I spoke with her that upon her return many years ago to Cleveland with her daughter Rachel, Morrie reached out to help them in ways that made their life in Cleveland more comfortable. And this is reminiscent of the ways in which Morrie cared for his parents in their declining years, and why, according to Morrie's friend Carol Marshall, Morrie decided a few years ago to buy a van so that he'd be able to drive himself and 4 or 5 friends on group outings, such as to the Spread Eagle Tavern in Hanoverton, Ohio, or to the Blossom Music Center. Now, one of Morrie's passions, as all who knew him well know, was cars, especially old cars. When he lived in Arkansas, he spotted and then fell in love with a 1938 Ford, a blue convertible with rumble seats. He bought the car and he named it Bassett. And later, he bought an old, beautiful 1936 Buick, which he named Bradley. Morrie was proud of these cars, worked on them, drove them to Hershey, Pennsylvania, periodically to purchase used parts for them. And Morrie always gave names to his automobiles. He was proud of these cars, drove them in parades, traveled in them to meetings. And as his nephew Matti told me yesterday, Morrie's regular car, the one he drove around the city for his daily chores and appointments, was, and now I quote Matti, an old new car. For Morrie would never, ever buy a brand new car because he reasoned new cars lose value the moment you drive them from the dealer. And this last point eases us into another of Morrie's signal characteristics, his frugality. He was, shall we say, careful with his money. If something, the carpeting in his home, for example, seemed perfectly fine to him, but to no other rational observer, then what could be the reason for buying new carpeting? And moreover, Morrie simply liked things the way they were. Why change? Why bother to change? Just because you think the situation screams out for change? As a result, those who happened to live with Morrie had to adjust to Morrie's reality, to Morrie's view. In a word, Morrie was stubborn, but always, I imagine, in a soft-spoken, kind, and resolutely immovable way. And those of us who knew Morrie well know how devoted he was to his beloved wife of 25 years, Wendy. Now, Wendy herself suffered from a chronic childhood illness, and at a certain point in her life, her malady began to spin out of control. Imminent death became a real possibility, and Wendy spent her last days in the hospital. Morrie, of course, was inconsolable and constantly with her, constantly at her side. And no one could blame him. No one did blame him when Wendy died soon after Morrie at one point stepped out of her room. No one could blame him, that is, except Morrie himself. He beat himself up about it, and no one could talk him out of it, then or for the rest of his days. And this is just one example of the specter that seemed to have plagued Morrie his entire life. A near paralyzing sense of guilt. Guilt for the things that he had done and who has not made mistakes in his or her own life, and mistakes that he had not done, but for which he nevertheless held himself responsible. I myself had several discussions with Morrie about this, and I tried to convince him that he had no reason to feel guilty, no reason to continue to beat himself up, that he had a right to forgive himself and to go on with his life. But Morrie would have none of it. He felt that he had let Wendy down, and he knew in his heart that he therefore had to go to the cemetery every day to apologize to her for this apparent transgression and for others that were still plaguing his conscience. Morrie was a good and gentle guy who cared deeply and who wanted the best for others. But his intense feelings of remorse held him back, had an outsized impact on his life and on his well-being. And for this, those of us who loved him remain deeply grieved. But none of this dilutes our affection for him, nor does it affect the memories of the many good times we had with him, the weekly breakfasts that several of us enjoyed together, the times of laughter, the times of intelligent conversation, and the times of friendship that we all feel privileged to have had. Morrie is survived by his dear and devoted friend Maida, his nephew Matti, and Matti's wife Alice, his nephew Yoel, his niece Ilana and Ilana's husband Yair, and his cousin Diane. He was predeceased by his parents, Annette and Leo, his wife of 25 years, Wendy, his sister Margie, and his brother-in-law Bernard. Now I want to pause for a moment at this time to pay special tribute to you, Maida, and to you, Matti. Maida, you for caring for him during his last months and for being with him almost every hour during his last days. And to you, Matti, for your many trips to Cleveland from Philadelphia, and for your love for and your loyalty to Morrie. Morrie Dannenhirsh lived a life of integrity and a life of caring for others. So many of us were drawn to him because of his goodness, because of his quiet sense of humor, because of his loyalty to those he loved, and for his gentleness. And we are indeed relieved to know that Morrie will no longer have to make his daily visits to the person he loved most, because he will now lie next to her forever. Rest in peace, dear friend. Amen. And I want to call first on Morrie's nephew, Matti, and then Monty's wife, Alice, who will speak and read something.
Today's Yom Kippur. I wanted to ask you for forgiveness. Forgiveness that I couldn't say goodbye the way I wanted. And that I was not on your side in the last days. That I didn't manage to say all I wanted to say. I hope you forgive me for that. What you called me every day and told me how you're doing. Yesterday you called and I had that feeling that the news is not going to be that good. I felt restless. And to feel closer to you, I went to my mother's grave and told her. I've been sharing with her every day and telling her how much we worried about you and how much you always would say everything's okay. When I need help, I'll ask for it. But Morrie, we knew you wouldn't ask for it, so we continued worrying, begging you to move into some senior living community. But you were stubborn. That's a theme in his life. We were happy when the angel came to help you. She took such good care of you. Thanks, Mila. To my memories, I remember an uncle that lived so far away in America, one that we saw so seldom. But when we came to visit, he always treated us well. An uncle that loved driving us in his old red Corvette. We forgot one. And how proud it made you. I remember an uncle who always asked about us, and when he called, as if we were his kids. I remember an uncle who was very close to his sister, my mother, and how he had long soul-searching conversations with her every few days. I remember a stubborn uncle, and soon we learned not to argue with Morrie. He has his ways. I remember a generous uncle who was always willing to help, and we'll miss you for that. Morrie, rest in peace.
I'm going to read some words that were written by Moti's son, Ben, who was Morrie's nephew. There's a long history of the Jewish people using humor to find their way through life. For me, Morrie was an embodiment of that history. No matter what he encountered it with the same sense of humor, the same desire to milk a laugh out of the trials and tribulations of everyday life. In all the years I knew him, I'm not sure he ever passed up the opportunity to make a joke and get a laugh. And for me, at least, it always worked. Morrie could be difficult, and he could be particular. But he could also find the humor and humanity in his own faults. In that way, he set an example for me. As an elder in our family, he always made it clear that he had high expectations for the people around him. But he also made it clear that he loved and respected and appreciated you regardless of whether you always met those expectations. A few weeks ago, I had a chance to spend some time with Morrie in Cleveland. I knew it would be my last chance to see him, and on the drive out from Philadelphia, I wondered what it would be like to say goodbye. I wondered what he would be like as he neared the end, and I wondered how he was confronting all those great questions that linger through life. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised that he was entirely himself, sarcastic and bittersweet, and still sharp with a joke. If his mind was on matters beyond this life, he didn't let on. He retained his own distinct personality every step of the way, right up to the end. I will miss Morrie, and the beauty of family and friendship is that he really won't be gone. I'll think of him when I'm overwhelmed by the strangeness of the world around me, and I'll find some humor in the moment and get a laugh from I know that if he were there, he'd be laughing too.
The voice says, cry out, and I say, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades, when a wind of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall endure forever. Hatzur tamim ba'alo ki chal derachav mishpat, el emuna ve'ein avel tzadik v'yasharhu. God is sure, our immovable rock, all God's work is upright. Who can say, what is it that you do? The Eternal governs what is above and what is below, overseeing both the valleys of death and the heights of life. God is sure, our immovable rock. Who can say to God, what will you do? You are righteous in your dealings in both death and life, and every soul is in your trust. We praise you, Judge of truth, who ordains death and summons us to life. Help us to feel your presence at this time, so that we may declare that God is upright, our rock, in whom there is no unrighteousness. O God of life, amid the ceaseless tides of change which sweep away the generations, your love remains to comfort us and to give us hope. Around us are life and death, decay and renewal, the flowing rhythm that all things obey. Our life is a dance to a song that we cannot hear. Its melody courses through us for a little while, then it seems to cease. Whence the melody, and whither does it go? In darkness as in light, we turn to you, the source of life and the answer to all of life's mysteries. As you are able, and if you wish, will you please rise? El Mole Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Ib Kadoshim Tahorim Kazohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Moshe Ben Levi Vanesha, Shahalach La'olamo, Bala Rachamim Yastirehu Beseter Kanafav La'olamim, Yitzror Bitzra Chayim Et Nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Moshe Morrie Dannenhirsh, our loved one who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say together, Amen. The dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God gave it. It is only the house of the spirit which we now live in the earth, the spirit itself will not die. Receive in mercy, O God, the soul of our beloved departed Morrie Dannenhirsh. Grant him that everlasting peace which you have prepared for us in the world to come. Though no human eye has seen, nor ear has heard, nor mind has grasped it, still it is our sure inheritance and our everlasting portion. O God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, that the pain which loss inflicts is a measure of a love that is stronger than death. Though we cry in the anguish of our hearts, may we know that our Comforter is near, and may we cling unafraid to the trusted hand. In the Spirit, O God, do we commit all that is precious to us to your keeping, as we now repeat the words that have been hallowed by our generations, the Kaddish, as we say together, Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, V'chayechon of Yomechon v'chayedechol Beit Yisrael v'agalav Izman Kari v'yamru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabba mevarach le'olam olamei Maya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalav shmei kudusha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiran v'yalma v'yamru Amen. Yehei Shalom Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru Amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort all the bereaved among us. And let us say together, Amen. And to family and friends gathered here, we now say, may God console you with all who mourn among all the families of the earth. Now go forth in peace to life, and may God go with you. Amen. I first want to ask Morrie's family and close friends to come forward and to place a handful of dirt on the casket. And those who would like to observe this custom may come forward and do that as well. During this period, we don't use a shovel. Pass it on from person to person. Each person may take a handful or so of dirt. Once again, we all feel very comforted by your presence here this afternoon. Thank you. Monty, why don't you come first? Okay.